Hi, I'm Dr. Ty Vincent. Talking about low dose immunotherapy again. This video is specifically about the concept of relative change. I throw that term out there to people. I think it bears fleshing out. And this is about dose reporting specifically. Okay, so when you report about a dose to me and whether or not it did anything, the key concept to keep in mind is the concept of relative change. So a change occurred in your symptoms or your reactions to something, and I need to know how much it changed. That's the relative part, okay? So that's what I use to make decisions time after time. In a general sense, if a dose caused no change, then we go ahead to the next stronger dilution for that antigen. If a dose made things worse, then we have to wait 7 weeks and back off to a weaker dilution because presumably the dose was too strong. If the dose seemed to make things better, then I need to know how much better, how much relative change there was, right? Like 100% gone, like my muscle pain is gone completely, I feel like a new man. Or my muscle pain is like 60% better, but it's not gone. I need to understand the degree, right? And if things are better 100%, like way better, then we may just want to repeat that same dose 7 weeks later, depending on how long the effect lasts. And if it's only partially better, we will probably continue on to the next stronger dose, but we may modify the timing or the increment, okay? So all of those elements of relative change are important. The first key element is understanding if things changed at all or not. So it's either the same, okay, my symptoms are basically the same, or my reaction to something was the same. Like if you eat corn and you get a horrible stomach ache and heartburn for 2 hours normally, then you take one of the food LDI doses and a week later you eat corn. If you get heartburn and a stomach ache the last couple hours, then you tell me my reaction was the same. If you only tell me I still reacted to corn, that is an insufficient response. I need to know same, or if the reaction was perhaps partially better or partially worse. So you have to give me that relative change concept, okay? I need to know very clearly and with no ambiguity if things are the same. That can be ambiguous on its own. So when you're dealing with chronically ill chronic things like chronic fatigue, chronic brain fog, muscle pain, joint pain, neuropathy symptoms or whatever, those tend to go up and down day by day. They're not the same every day, right? So you have to know what your usual range of symptoms is like. Like, here's what my bad days are like, and here's what my good days are like, or the other way around, if that makes you happy, whatever. You need to know what your typical bad days feel like, what your typical good days feel like. And if everything stays within that range after you take a dose, like a couple of good end days and a couple of bad end days, a couple of good end days, then you tell me it's the same. I don't need to know 2 good days, 2 bad days, 2 good days, 2 bad days. I need you to tell me it was the same kind of thing I usually experience, because that's what makes the decision about what to do next. If you tell me I had a couple of bad days first and then a couple of better days, I could misinterpret that to think that the dose was too strong. So you have to base your assessment on your usual experience and discuss it in terms of relative to that. That's the key I got to drive home to people, because people will try to give me like a daily diary sort of thing. These 2 days my pain went up a little bit, these 2 days went down a little bit. I don't want that, because that leads to a lot of misinterpretation. I need you to look back over the whole week and tell me it was the same shit, different day. Okay, this is the same stuff I've lived with for the last 10 years. I can't say it's appreciably different. And then we move on, because that's how you make progress. One thing I would say about that at this point then is, don't try hard to decide something happened. I get a lot of that. People will send a very long email, and at the beginning of the email, they'll say something like, I'm really not sure what to tell you about this dose, or I can't really decide if this is better or worse or the same, or I'm confused or whatever. And to be honest with you, I don't read past that. I don't read the page email afterwards where you describe to me why you're confused. What that means to me when you start your email that way is that nothing happened. And that's why it's confusing, because your day-to-day life is up and down, and then you take a dose and you really want something to be different, so you're looking for something to tell me that might mean something's different. But statistically, the most likely outcome from any LDI dose you take is going to be no change, right? If there's 20 possible doses to try and only one of them will work, odds are most of them will do nothing, but anything stronger than where we were will make you worse. So once you get past that sweet spot, then you get into worsening, and then it becomes pretty obvious. So unless a change is truly obvious, just tell me nothing probably changed, and we can move on. Because it's all about making progress steadily through the possible doses until we do figure out what you need. And people will waste months, or in some cases years, trying to make something out of nothing in terms of their response. More often they think that things got worse when really they're dealing with the same stuff day after day, and it's just bad. When it's hard to determine when bad becomes horrible for some people. So oftentimes if we try a few doses and they all seem to cause, have the same kind of bad outcome, but they were different doses, that means none of them did anything. And so we can sometimes determine what's going on from a larger collective of dose experience. And then when I tell you, all right, you told me the same kind of thing from these few doses, I don't think anything's actually happening, we better keep going the other direction, go stronger now, you should listen, because that's how we figure it out. In terms of allergies, I need to know relative change regarding your reaction. So if you normally get sneezing and a little bit of itchy nose around cats, you take your environmental dose or the animal subset dose, and then a week later you need to expose yourself to a cat. Go to the Humane Society or go to a friend's house that has a cat. And if you don't notice any symptoms at all, then you say, it was better, but not only better, I had no reaction. No reaction. That's what we're looking for with allergies. If it was still a mild reaction, but not as bad as normal, then we're almost there, but not there yet. So the goal is 100% elimination of your chronic symptoms or 100% elimination of your allergy reactions. So in terms of relative change, it has to be based on your usual experience, and it has to be based on your usual experience over time if it's a chronic situation. Like if you have chronic joint pain, but occasionally you have 2 or 3 days where it's not so bad, you could take an LDI dose and then just randomly have one of your not so bad, stretches of 2 or 3 days. If that happens and then it goes back to usual, we might just say, well, that happens sometimes, let's ignore it and try the next stronger dose. So you have to know that about yourself, basically. This requires that you understand you and your history and your usual experience, and you tell me how your symptoms the week after your dose compare to that. Because I don't live in your body, I only live in this one, which has got its ups and downs. I don't live in your body specifically. I rely upon you to make that assessment as to whether things got better or worse. So if people write a big long description of how their symptoms felt, I can't make a decision based on that. It's not useful. If you give me a daily journal that says these days I had a headache, these days my toe hurt, these days whatever, I can't make anything out of that either, because I need to know how you compare that week to your usual weeks. That's what I need from you. You have to make that assessment. And sometimes people are reluctant to do that. They want me to read all this daily journal and daily data and then go back and read whatever my first note was and try to decide what they're telling me. And number one, that takes way too much time, honestly, for me to do that for 30 people a day. And number two, I get that wrong half the time. When people give me a daily diary to interpret, my assessment of what they're saying is different from what they think half the time, easily. So if you send me a daily journal or a daily diary, I will just flat out tell you, I can't interpret that, you need to make a decision. If you can't make an easy decision, like, oh, I was definitely better or I was definitely worse, then tell me it's probably the same, and we just move on. Because that relative change is not clear, so it's probably not relevant. And hopefully that makes enough sense to everybody through my rambling. But basically understand your baseline, which could be an up and down baseline, and you have to compare to that range. Understand circumstantially what it takes to normally set off your symptoms if you're dealing with allergies. So, if you have to eat a bowl full of cereal before you normally get diarrhea, then that's what you've got to do as your test. You can't just have 2 bites of cereal and go, oh, I was okay this time, I guess the dose worked. Well, no, because you didn't eat enough cereal to cause diarrhea under normal circumstances, right? So your relative change has to be based on your typical experience, the amount of exposure it takes to get a symptom, and whether or not that symptom occurred the same. And that's all individualized. It's not something that I can tell anyone how to do it. You just have to know yourself. All right, I'll leave it at that. We'll move on. Thanks.